ready for a legislative town hall in North Idaho with Representative Heather Scott and Representative Sage Dixon. They will be up here momentarily. If you are here, let me know. They've got a pretty good turnout. People are still coming in. Just a little dinky town in North Idaho, but I expect to have this room pretty close to full before they're ready. We are in Priest River, Idaho, at the River City Christian Fellowship Church. They've been really good about sharing their facilities for political events, as well as community events. Well, look who's here. Mr. Heather Scott.
Yes.
Say hello. We've got quite a few people still coming in. It's funny because we've seen some of the same people at these events, but I'm starting to see a few new faces, which is what we like to see. Looks like we've got Ryan Durbin here today.
You're going to post the video online?
It's live on YouTube right now.
Oh, live? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I had to get it going a little bit early just to make sure I was all set up right. Decided I wasn't going to cut it off.
So it goes live direct, just loads live on, and then
people around the world right now can go to my channel and see it. And I've already posted on Facebook to come over there and take a look.
So how do I find your channel?
I forgot my business cards. I'm Readout News.
So the reason I asked is because I'm so hard of hearing. This has been a long time since I've been in a group meeting, and I'm totally frustrated already.
I get that. Yeah. I'm hard of hearing as well.
So if I get home and in a quiet place and good speakers and maybe closed caption if I'm lucky.
I don't know if they'll do that or not.
Some of them will do it automatically.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's one of the reasons I came up close, to make it a little easier to hear. I'm hoping that'll work better than, I could get a better picture over there, but I get better sound over here.
Okay. So
that's why I decided to try it this way. But, I can only give it a go.
So
it's Readout News, RED.
Oh, Readout News?
Yeah, do you know?
I'm already hooked up on that.
But it's going to be on our YouTube channel.
On the website.
Yeah, and you're going to see your picture on there. There you go. Say hello.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you.
There you go.
Yeah, great. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you, too. Thank you for coming.
I've always been a little bit maybe too passionate about politics, but...
Are we all?
I mean, yeah, I'm very concerned about our country. This is one of the little bright spots in the country right here in North Idaho.
That's right.
It's a grassroots effort. It'd be nice to see more young people, but...
I am seeing a few new faces that I don't recognize. I see a whole lot of faces I do recognize.
I'm a transplant. I bought a place over here 7-8 years ago.
I'm going to put you back on here so they know who's talking.
I used to work at Boeing, and I retired and fixed up a little cabin.
Here comes Heather.
Yeah.
We better get out of her way.
Nice to
We'll
meet you.
talk again later. Representative Heather Scott. Say hello. Hi. There's Representative Sage Dixon coming in.
Bow our heads in prayer. Father, we thank you for this time we have to gather. We thank you for this house that you've furnished us. We ask you to be with each one of us today, to guide and bless us. And we ask you to put a special blessing on our candidates. And we ask these things in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen. President Lynch. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks for coming. The biggest audience I've had in a while. This is good. We're going to start with the spiels, I guess, the updates. The updates for what's going on down in the legislation. And from what I understand, Sage goes first and then Heather follows. It's been a tradition today, so we'll keep going.
Thank you, Robert. It is a spiel. That's a good term. Especially this being the third one of the day for us. And
Yeah.
it changes, it's nuanced a little bit each time. But thank you all for coming out. It is nice to see more people than I normally draw. I know the other good representative brings a few more people than I do normally. But it's good to have you here and to hear us. I think what we've done earlier in the day is we each give a little bit of an overview. I go first because I'm not as exciting as Representative Scott, so she gets to wake you up when I'm done. And then we take some questions and interact with you and express what we've seen. So the first thing, this is a very busy session. It is unlike the 3 previous sessions that we've both been in. I know Rep. Scott agrees with me on this, and that's due to a number of things, but primarily it's due to the fact that we have compressed our schedule just a little bit due to the lawsuit against the governor's veto this summer, and the way the Supreme Court ruled in saying that, well, yes, the governor was right to veto within this stipulated period of time, which isn't what our Constitution says, but they said, legislature, you have to make sure that he has the bills on his desk 5 days before you adjourn. So we were running 5 days shorter, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have all this legislation to get compressed into an 80 to 90 day schedule, it really shortens your deadline. So March 9th, and I keep saying the 5th, I believe it's March 9th, is our last transmittal date, which means all the business and bills in the House have to be done by March 9th so they can be sent to the Senate. So they have a few weeks to go over them through their committees and through their floor session to get those bills out. The same thing on their side, they need to be done by March 9th to bring them over to us. So those 5 days in that target has really compressed our schedule. Add to that it's an election year, so everybody's a bit more excited, either running against somebody, running for higher office. A lot of bills get run that are to make you look good back home too. And usually the minority party's involved in that. Things that they do, they will never get through the legislature, but they're able to get them printed and go home and say, here's what I've done for you. So that adds to our workload through the committees. We're hearing those things, reading across the desk. Rarely do we vote on some of those. And then the other thing is that the number of people that are leaving the legislature this year, in addition to our new congressman, new governor, new lieutenant governor, there's just a real buzz about the building at this point in time. And there will be a large turnover, roughly a third of the legislature potentially will be changing. At least 15 people in the House are either retiring or running for a higher office or a different office, and the Senate has a few also. And this legislature and the state government's going to look dramatically different in 2019 after this election. And so people are excited about that. And there's just a lot of activity and a buzz, things that are going on really quickly. Or they're moving a lot faster, even than a previous election year, but that's added to this. So I have a few ideas. I'm on the Finance and Appropriation Committee, and what that does is it sucks up about 80% of my time, 90% of my time for First few weeks of the session, I'm sitting in a room, a conference room, used to be the Supreme Court room when the Supreme Court was housed in our Capitol building, for 3 hours a day, from 8 to 11 o'clock, hearing budget presentations. It's very dry, but it's part of the work that we do. But what that does is it restricts me for those hours from interacting with other legislators or working on my own legislation. So I'm not running as many bills as I tried to do my first 2 years and ideas that I've had. There's a couple things that I was interested in doing this year. One of them was human trafficking, again, something that I did my first year and was looking these past 3 years at what can I do to help improve this situation within Idaho regarding human trafficking. And another one was helping our veterans, trying to find a way to make their lives better in the state of Idaho. I ran into a gentleman from Florida at a national conference who was a veteran and had some really good legislation they ran in Florida that helped veterans transition back into the working world. They're leaving the service, whatever skills they gained in the service, they could immediately apply them under state licensing rules and get them into the working world, and that's what he found most effective. When I got down to Boise and started researching this a little bit, I found there was other legislators working on similar things. The veterans legislation, there were 2 legislators who were veterans already working on things like that. Wonderful. I gave them what I had and said, go for it. I don't need to do that, and they've been doing good things with that. The human trafficking legislation, another legislator had some groups in the Ada County area approach him, and they run homes for rescued girls, women who come out of human trafficking, with some ideas. So he came to me because I kind of got a reputation, and I'm thankful for it, to be somebody who's interested in those issues and working on those issues. And the first part of it is a wonderful change, and it will make a difference. It's a very simple change, and we like this. A lot of times people get up on the floor and say, this is a very simple bill. And it could be, or they go on for an hour telling you how simple it is. But currently the statute for human trafficking, and it's a felony to traffic somebody, but it says if you're trafficking persons, so it's plural. So what those men did, or whomever were trafficking them, they would bring just one person at a time. And they couldn't be convicted of that because the law didn't state that. So just removing that S on the legislation is one part of our proposal. It was very simple to do, and it'll have a large effect. The second part of that was attacking the demand side of human trafficking and prostitution, essentially. Through the years, what's been happening is they've been going after the pimps and the traffickers and the people that are providing these women, but not those that are seeking to have that, and men, oftentimes. And so even internationally. And what's been found is that's not really decreasing human trafficking at all. You pick a few off here and there, but something else pops up, or they find a way to go around it. And what has helped immensely in Scandinavia is to go after the purchasers, the demand side of this equation. So currently, if you get caught purchasing a prostitute, it's a misdemeanor, second time's a misdemeanor, third time felony. And what our legislation did was make it a felony on the first offense in doing that, in trying to limit this. And what statistics have shown through groups that are active with human trafficking is it is college-educated, upper middle class men who are the ones out there doing this. And if there was that threat of a felony, that would cause many of them to think, is this really worth it? Do I want to get into this and have that stick on me? The problem is we got into committee. The first one flew through fine. The second one, there was a lot of hesitancy towards making that a felony. We had 13 women, or maybe eight women, come and tell their story. These heart-wrenching stories. There was a 15-year-old girl that was telling her story of being trafficked. There was a woman who was 40 and now had a family and a nice life, but she had been trafficked, had to leave the state of Arizona and change her name because they were still pursuing her after she had got out. And these stories, it's incredible. If you're not familiar with it, it is just devastating. The extent of human trafficking and what these ladies in that case had to go through. The committee still had some difficulty with offering this protection to them, thinking that it would be egregious to have it a felony on the first offense. They were thinking, what if it's just some young man that is out seeking some fun? But that's not what the statistics bear out. And it's also then at the discretion of the prosecuting attorney. And a lot of times these would just be probationary. They wouldn't be thrown into prison on these offenses. But the severity of the punishment has led to a decrease in trafficking. And a lot of states are going this way also. It is kind of languishing right now on general orders, isn't it? I think it's on looking to be amended. So there's still a little bit of hope. We've looked at making it the second offense, trying to make it a little more palatable, but still moving in that direction to remove the demand side of that equation because it has shown. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'll get it for you, Ingrid. I'm sorry. Once again, most of the time I'm in the budget here, so And I came and helped present the bill in its first instance, and then the other gentleman's been the one doing it other times. So now I forgot where I was. Thank you for that question. Okay. Is this what I was hoping to work on? So the budgets, and that is a big part of my role in doing that. Sitting in there, let's see, last Friday we started setting budgets for 2019. We've heard all the budget reports coming through, and now we're setting them. And budgets are assigned to different people, or you can ask to be a part of it. Sometimes there's only one person working on a budget. Sometimes there's 4 or 6, and with the public school funding budget, that usually has 6 people, and they have meetings with different people, so that there's a lot of input into what happens there. The other large one is health and welfare, where a lot of people join on. Most of the ones I do are not quite so active, except for ITD. I do carry ITD's 4 budgets, and I usually have about 2 or 3 other people looking at that with me. One senator, because he'll carry these budgets in the Senate as I carry them in the House. I'm doing the Department of Building Safety, and then I do DEQ, and Public Utilities Commission, Lieutenant Governor. A lot of these are just straightforward. When the legislature says we're going to give an increase to state employees, that becomes part of that budget. If we have to pay more for insurance costs and things like that we just call maintenance, pretty straightforward. The DEQ has a large one this year because we are, maybe Rep. Scott can talk about this, it's a funny term, primacy. We call it primacy within the state. It means you have state employees enforcing federal regulations as opposed to federal employees enforcing federal regulations. This year we're going after the pollution discharge. Not going after it, but that change is happening. We've been approved to be responsible for that. So that'll take some more money coming into the DEQ budget from federal funds, but they won't be enforcing those things anymore. The DEQ will. Department of Building Safety is looking for more inspectors, general things like that. It's all pretty straightforward. ITD is pretty straightforward. It's a very large budget because of the road systems, and we've given them increasing amounts of dollars since Representative Scott and I have been in different programs to help fund the roads and the issues that we have on the roads. That one takes a lot of time to go through and look. They're always asking for more trucks and computers and office furniture, and to be responsible, we have to look at those. Is this really a need? You go to the department, talk to them, see what the things are there, have your analyst ask a lot of questions. It looked like ITD was carrying twice their amount of appropriation. If we give them $300 million, they've got $700 million sitting there, and that's a big red flag. So we look at that, and all those dollars are already ready to be paid out for construction. So they're just waiting for those contracts to be fulfilled, and then it goes out. So little things like that matter. Something interesting in not looking to be a part of it with legislation when I've been down there is gross vehicle weight rating. So we took on, through Code of Federal Regulations, the CFR, which we do in a lot of committees and not really knowing what we take sometimes, is a rate rating, a safety rating for vehicles. And what it's based upon is what the truck and trailer can carry. So if you are over 26,000 pounds with your truck and your trailer, you have to have a commercial license. And we have a lot of agricultural guys hauling horses, sheep, cattle, and then also just general contractors, landscapers, that'll have a 1-ton truck and a dump bed that they're hauling nowhere near 26,000 pounds. But the fact that they can do that, they can be pulled over and cited for not having a commercial driver's license. A few weeks ago, one of our cattlemen from up over in the Sandpoint area and one in Bonners Ferry called me and said, "What's going on here? We're starting to hear this is a problem." So that's been something I've been looking into. It turns out there's an exemption for ag, which there is for a lot of things in Idaho because agricultural industry is so important in the state. So there's a line item there because I was looking just to add the word livestock because it says agricultural products and items of husbandry and things that point more towards farmers and not ranchers. But as I looked further into the statute, there it was. But the other side of that equation is just your general contractors or people that have trailers and are trying to move things. They can still be cited. We were told this morning of a gentleman in Bonners Ferry that got pulled over and ticketed because he potentially could carry something at that weight. Not that he was, but the potential was there. And that was the answer we actually got from the state troopers. We had a meeting, myself and the transportation chairman and the Senate transportation chairman had a meeting with our state troopers and the gentleman from the federal government in charge of this. And they said, well, you might be able to carry something at that weight, so therefore we're requiring that you do. It wasn't that you are carrying something by that weight. And there was somebody down in the Boise area that was ticketed, a landscaper with an empty dump bed who was pulled over and said, you need to get something else to move this trailer. And he went and got a 3/4 ton truck, and the trooper said, nope, that's still overweight. Go get your 1/2 ton truck and pull your dump trailer out of here, otherwise it's a $10,000 fine for violating federal law. So we had a little more understanding when we met with the federal government and the troopers, because they said we don't pull people over based upon what we think they might be doing. There has to be an initial moving violation, initial infraction. But then we heard from this gentleman in Bonners Ferry that hadn't happened to. We're looking into the gentleman down in Ada County to see if that's what it was. But I think we're still going to go forward with some legislation and test our luck, because we're pushing back against federal government's code. And it's something that transfers state lines, but within Idaho, to just say an actual weight. And the troopers didn't like it. They said, how are we going to do this? We can't force people to go to the weigh stations, but it may involve getting them some scales. And if that's what it takes to keep people traveling, freely, rather than being pulled over for an assumed violation, then maybe that's something we'll do. But not something I was expecting to work on, but something I'm glad to keep working on. And I know I've got one more thing, and I'm sorry. My phone just... the interim committee. I was on an interim committee looking at our campaign finance reform. And something Rep. Scott has been saying that is absolutely true on this committee is that sometimes they form these interim committees, but there's already a goal in mind. This is just kind of sometimes for show, in a sense. And sometimes different things will come out of it. But in this case, I think that's what it was. And one piece of legislation that came out of it that thankfully was killed rather quickly would have required incumbents and candidates to disclose any dollars they received over $5,000. And not only yourself, and it wasn't just my corporation paying me, but if I worked for Ingrid and then worked for Robin, if they were paying me over this, I would have to cite all those names as well, not just the corporation paying me, but then also your spouse. They wanted to know what your spouse made, where your spouse works, and any money over $5,000, and then also anybody that may live on your property, if there's any other adults that are living with you or whatnot. In the guise of so there's no conflict of interest, you're not hiding anything that you may be voting on, but it was an awful piece of legislation based upon something in Utah. But this one, I'm sure, was structured right in with that committee, and I think Rep. Scott, it was on her committee, so she can speak about that a little more. There was another bill that was very long that came out of there also that had some good things in there because it required public disclosure for different boards that people are elected to, your fire boards, your school boards, things like that, that right now you have to report the money, but it's not made public. So we don't know how these people are funded and financed sometimes, and who's going on boards that make some vital decisions in our communities. But there was other pieces within that required disclosure of the top 10 donors, regardless if they were engaged in political work or not. They call it electioneering communications or something like that. Didn't matter if I gave you money, not for that purpose. If I was a large donor to you, you would have to disclose that. And what that does is it allows people who are opposed to you to target you, to find out if I don't like your 501c3 or whatever it may be, I can go after those people to try and harm you to do that. And that's something that we need to protect against. And thankfully that bill died as well. But other variations are sure to surface in doing that. Lastly, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, I'm tired. It's been a long day. I can't remember as well. My phone keeps closing down on me. Because I had one more thing. Oh, Priest Lake. So that the thoroughfare and the dam. Now the governor recommended funding for rebuilding the dam and automating it somewhat. A wonderful gentleman, Carl, out there that does it all manually. There's 8 gates, and he takes a whole hog out there, and he's made his own ratchet head to raise and lower these gates, and he leans over there, 8 foot wide, water flowing, and he opens these gates one at a time going through there. And when we went and toured that a couple of years ago, we thought something's going to go dramatically wrong here. And he's a wonderful gentleman that was very reticent to pass that responsibility on to somebody else. So we started the conversation, what can we do to make this automated and a little easier on whomever is responsible to do this, because it's the state's property right now. It was funded through Avista, through some grants being part of the Columbia River system, but those grants have since went away for whatever reason with Avista. We're looking at trying to get them back to help with that. But so the governor recommended funding that, but not the thoroughfare work. But we were able to go to the Department of Water Resources, and then they were very helpful in talking with them. Rather than having to take general funds, money from our general pool that goes to a lot of other things, and try and argue for why we needed it here at Priest Lake, the Department of Water Resources had some money left over from a prior appropriation. Now, they should have given it back a long time ago, but they neglected to do so. But they were helpful in saying, we can make up that difference and get that whole project done at this time. So that's all going forward, and then there's been some wonderful participation from the folks that live around that lake to help put some money in, and in Bonner County as well, that encourages the Department of Water Resources to go through with this. So that looks like we'll be able to start those 2 projects up there and get that straightened up. There's also another bill that will allow us to fluctuate that lake level, which was the problem when we had the drought in the fight between letting it down the river and keeping the lake level at a certain level that was statutory. So now we can fluctuate 3.5 inches if it passes the House. I believe it passed the Senate already, but it'll come through the House. So those are some local issues. I'm going to step down now. Representative Scott will come up and energize you. And thank you for being here, and we'll have some questions when she's done speaking.
I don't know if I can energize you. We got into town last night, and I think I got home at 10:30. I'm guessing Sage got home later than that. So we're a little wiped up, and we were wiped out, and we were up in Bonner's Ferry this morning by 9:30. So patience. So as Representative Dixon said, things are moving at lightning speed down there this year. I think the last 3 years of putting the pressure on that we have, and the citizens' pressure, educating citizen, is really starting to make a difference. And I'm starting to see it, we're starting to see it with our bills. Because up until this year, most of our bills were locked in committee drawers, as I've shared with you in the past. This year, all of our bills are being heard, given an initial hearing, at least presenting our ideas. Now, not every bill will make it much further past that, but some of them have. And so what I wanted to do this afternoon is just focus on a lot of the bills. I'm going to kind of go quick and just give you highlights on some of the good bills, some of the bad bills, and kind of where things are moving. So I had to make up for lost time after last year, as you might remember. So I ran like 18 bills this year. And so I have a whole bunch of different ones. Some of my bills, a lot of them are from citizen ideas and citizen driven. One, I had a gentleman call me who got pulled over for a speeding ticket, and he said, I was not speeding on the highway. And he asked the patrolman, hey, can you show me the radar? Because I know I wasn't speeding. And they said, well, we've already cleared the machine. We can't show you. So just run a simple bill that said you have to save that reading throughout the traffic stop. You don't understand when you get into these bills you think they're simple, just like Representative Dixon said, oh, this just seems like a simple bill. Then you find out, well, maybe the equipment's not set up for that, maybe you learn all kinds of things. One bill I ran it was a citizen-driven bill on motorcycles, so they could just renew their license or their registration for 6 months instead of a year, because up here we really can't be on the roads for much more than 6 months. Well, it turns out that I thought, well, that'd be easy. You just cut the fee in half and it'll be an easy deal. Well, it turns out it would have cost more to do it for just half a year because of all the fees they add in. You'd be paying the fees twice, and you'd pay more in the long run for doing it that way. So you just don't understand how complex things get and how they affect, and you really don't understand till you present something and you think, who would be against this bill? And then there's all these lobbyists in there going, we hate this bill. So that's really interesting. There's just a ton of bills. I'm just going to hit some. There's a really good bill, firearms training in schools. So where it doesn't say you have to train the kids on firearms, but literally that you're allowed to teach this in the schools. There's so many. Okay, so like I said, a lot of our bills are starting to be heard, and many of them are actually getting hearings. So you have to introduce it first, and if they like it, they let you come back for a hearing. You get a bill number, and then some of those bills are actually making it through a hearing, going to the House floor, and a few of them are actually passing on the House floor. And so for the last 3 years, what we have seen is our ideas have been just suppressed and we don't even get our ideas out. So here's some of the good bills that have actually made it out of committee. American Laws for American Courts, or Idaho Laws for Idaho Courts, which basically says you can't use foreign law in our courts. Some judges across the country are actually using Sharia law to settle disputes. And basically this law says, it didn't single out Sharia, it basically just said, in Idaho, you're going to use Idaho law and American laws. That passed through the committee. There was a ton of testimony, against it, how it was singling out, but it was written really well, and it passed the House floor. So that bill will be heard by the Senate probably next week. Repeal of Common Core, it actually got a hearing, so we could actually get the conversation going and talk about the problems with it. This is huge, to be able to at least discuss these sides of things. Tax reduction plan. Someone, here's a bill that I think this passed through the committee. It will probably make it to the House floor. That I don't know if you're aware, but Idaho is growing. We are the #1 state in the country for growth, for population growth right now. And so what this bill, it's a simple bill, and it says after 6% growth, the money we've come in is over 6%, then we're going to give money back to the citizens. We're going to reduce their individual taxes and the corporate taxes by 0.1%. So it just kind of writes that into code. It automatically will happen. Your income taxes will go down as Idaho continues to grow. I don't know that that's made it through the Senate yet, but it'll be good when it does. CBD oil, you probably are going to hear a lot about that. It will be on the House floor this week. This is, it's a product from hemp that helps with epileptic seizures and some other medical conditions, and many people in our state are actually using it. So that's coming to the floor this week. Okay, I had a bill this week. It died, but it might be resurrected. And it was to get rid of, well, let me say this again. So you all know levies. They always seem to be a frustrating point when a school runs a levy. There's many aggressive taxing districts in the state that will run a levy, and when it fails, they'll rerun it in 2 months. They'll rerun it. They can run that up to 4 times a year until they catch the right group of voters. So I figured this would be a no-brainer, and it passed committee, and I thought, wow, this is actually going to make it. So that it would make them have to wait a year until they rerun a levy, which would make them kind of think about it. It kind of give a pause, and so that died on that House floor because it went to the amending order for some technical problems, and then there were a bunch of amendments that got added to it. So that didn't make it, but it might be resurrected with a little tweak to it. So be looking for that on Monday. There's so many. We have now made it, and we've passed a bill. This probably nobody here, but breastfeeding is no longer an indecent exposure in Idaho. So in case you were wondering, that's passed. There were 2 bills that got out of committee that, I mean, it's just, I guess it's really exciting for me because we're starting to see North Idaho ideas, conservative liberty ideas actually getting talked about down at the Capitol, which was not happening for at least the first 3 years we were there. And so there's a bill on indefinite detention, you know, the NDAA, if you've heard about that, where the federal government can pick you up off the streets and hold you indefinitely without due process. And so it basically says that this is not allowed in Idaho, and we will push back on it. And so that passed committee. We also had one that strengthened our 10th Amendment. We have the 10th Amendment right in our state to push back on federal law we don't like. Washington does this with the marijuana laws. We get a lot of federal laws that as Representative Dixon was talking about, through the transportation, we don't like that law. Sometimes it's hard as a legislator to be able to push back on it. The bill we passed actually says, it gives you a process on how to push back on it. So that made it out of committee. We had lots of debate, conversations, made it to the House floor, lots of conversations, but then it died, which is okay. At least we're having the conversations. Has anyone heard about the trespass bill? Okay, you will. This is a big bill. It's going to be on the House floor in the next 2 weeks. Right now in Idaho, you need to mark your property or people can actually come on it. So if you own 100 acres, if you don't have it marked every 600 feet with a bright orange, then people can come on it and hunt and fish or hike. So this kind of changes the thinking. There's no other states around us that do it. It's usually up to the person hiking or fishing or hunting to know if it's private property or not. It puts the burden on the person and not the property owner. So it just swaps that. Right now with trespass, the biggest complaint citizens have is that it's not being enforced. So I don't know if anyone's had a trespassing problem. I see some nods. So someone trespasses and it's a $25 fine, and usually it's just probably not worth it. This new law will change it to $500 for your first offense. After your third offense, it's going to be a felony. So, I mean, this is a serious law change. It's a huge chunk what they're doing with this law. It's 15 pages. It's a huge step. There's probably things that are going to need to be hashed out. It's not a perfect bill, but it does protect property owners, and I think it's a move in the right direction. That's being brought by Farm Bureau. Okay, a couple more. Article 5 convention. This was a highly debated topic. It's the ability for the states to come to the federal, as states and propose an amendment to the Constitution. I listened to 6.5 hours of testimony. This is highly debated. There's a lot of good points on both sides. There's many people passionate on both sides. That if you're interested in this topic, and I think Sherry's here, she's listened to probably most of that testimony. Did you? All of it, 6.5 hours. The one thing is for sure, people in this state love our Constitution, love our country, no matter which side they're on, and they want to protect what they have. They do realize what we have and how valuable it is. So that's something that I did vote against for various reasons. I think if you get my newsletter, you'll know. But it was highly debated, and you get torn by these bills. You think you're on one side, then you're on the other side, and the debate really does. It's really worth going online and watching some of the testimony. So I have a bill coming up Monday morning. If you want to watch testimony, it's to allow retired law enforcement officers that have a certain concealed card to be able to carry in schools and campus, dorms, and auditoriums. So that's coming up this week. There's so many. Okay, I want to hit some bad bills real quick. So just because there were some. So we get lobbied hard by the governor, and I think I've talked about this before. The executive branch lobbies the legislators, basically controls what happens in the legislature to a pretty, for many things. And so this year the governor has, he gives us his agenda, and basically leadership tries to make that agenda happen. And part of that this year is, we're calling it the Otter Care Plan. It's their health care plan. It's how to deal with the gap and all these issues with health care, which the conservatives do not believe that this plan is going to fix the problems we have and is the best solution. So what the conservative liberty folks have done is we've come up with alternative bills to these bad plans. And the nice thing about it is, now that our voices, we at least get to introduce our bills, they get to hear. We have bill numbers, we have actual language, we can actually compare the bills. And if you go to growingfreedomforidaho.com, it lists all the bills, but there's some comparison charts on the governor's plan and then the conservative Republican Liberty plan. And there's a stark contrast there. And so you're going to be hearing a lot about the governor's health care plan in the next few weeks. I was told, I don't know how many other people were told, that they're waiting till after March 9th, the last day you can file for candidacy, and any Republicans that don't have opponents will be pressured to vote in favor of this bill to get it passed for the governor. A lot of the agenda coming through is coming from the National Governors Association. The transportation tax last year came from the governor. Common Core came from the Governors Association. Health care plan and their tax relief plan came from the Governors Association. The tax relief plan, you go, well, how can a tax relief be bad? Well, it's not. It's just Idaho's sitting on a lot of money, and the tax plan is like that big. So it's a tiny, tiny, like, oh, there's your breadcrumbs, here's some money back, to where we have an alternative plan that would get rid of the grocery tax. It would lower, we call it the big tax plan. And so you can see those comparisons on the website. I won't go on with that. Who has got a mailing or saw on Facebook the beat up woman with Heather Scott's picture saying, tell Heather to support victims? Anybody got that, seen that? So let me tell you, that's called Marcy's Law. And so this is being driven by a billionaire out of California who has a ton of money. And he is pumping millions of dollars into our state and marketing it heavy. Last year he presented this bill the last week of session. I think it was actually the last couple days of session. It is a constitutional change. It would change our Constitution when it comes to victims. And when we all care about victims, last year's plan was actually going to give victim status to corporations and businesses. And the way this bill is written, or this constitutional change, it will, when I accuse someone of something, I'm automatically the victim when I'm accusing. And for me being a victim, then I get a lawyer. I think there's going to be some unfunded mandates with this where we can go to trial and come after this guy that's not even been, or woman, who hasn't even been charged with a crime yet. So it makes someone a victim before they're really a victim. And so there's stuff in place, there's good parts. So we came up with an alternative, the Idaho Victims Act. And this one was written by Liberty legislators who basically said, we can fix this in code, we can address some of these problems in code, we don't need to put it in the Constitution, and we don't need to take away the innocent until proven guilty of someone that's convicted of a crime. And that's what they're trying to do. This has been pushed so much across the country. I don't know what the end plan is, if there's some treaty they're trying to get. If they get all the states on board, then they can join some treaty or something. But 6 of the states passed it last year. They're trying to pull back. One of them said it's a violation of their constitution, and they're trying to, of how it happened. And then the other place is they're trying to repeal it right now. I can't remember the states offhand.
Montana, South Dakota.
Montana, South Dakota. So, there's so much. I mean, I could just keep going on. Some of these bills. Here was another bad one. We just, how Representative Dixon talks about they're putting this federal code right into our state law. So last week, the bill came through. They want to set up all this structure for chicken farms and how much waste they can put and how it's going to affect the environment and this and that. And one of the parts of language said we wanted socially responsible chicken farming. And so, of course, I'm like, well, what does socially responsible chicken farming? Oh, we don't know what that definition means. Okay, so someone else said, well, how many chicken farms do we have in the state that this will affect? 0. So here we are inserting all this federal code right into our state law. We don't even have a problem. And so usually, sometimes when you come up with a good bill and they're like, well, what's the problem you're trying to fix? We don't even have a problem here, but because it's from the feds and because that pressure's being put on us, we're pushing. But the good thing is, as Representative Dixon said, we have almost 15 people that will not be with us next time. And then we have about 15 to 20 at this point that have stepped up. They're kind of like-minded, conservative, liberty, Republicans across the state that are challenging and going after some of these committee chairmen and positions. The system is still broken. The process is broken, but I think we've made a huge move from never hearing our bills to now we're at least getting hearings. You know, they may kill them later on, but it's kind of been encouraging, and we're having the conversations. So, and okay, let's see. I got so much to talk about. I'm gonna just hit a few more things. If you remember, Quillen, I don't know if anyone remembers Quillen from the county fair last year. They helped me out. She has come down to help us for 2 months, which has been such a blessing to have her help read bills, compare bills. The bill that Sage was talking about that came from that interim committee, Secretary of State. It's a horrible bill. It's 30 pages. It has all this stuff in it. Well, Quillen went through all 30 pages line by line with what the committee presented and what the Secretary of State gave us. And guess what? So, since we had the extra help, she found something that they just happened to slip in case that bill got passed. And so we're waiting for that bill to come back to expose all that. It's kind of exciting when you have a little help and down there and to read the bills. And I don't know, Doug is a bill reader. We have a citizen bill reading team that they read a lot of these bills. They send them out to experts. It's just been amazing.
College campuses is because they imagined a room like this. My conception was 1 or 2 individuals that want to comment, and you could do it in a smaller location. Their perception was, we're going to have a room full of people. How do we facilitate this with remote testimony? People aren't jumping up and fighting each other or whatever in doing that. So they put it in a place where they could have security, where they could limit the testimony to some logical order and sense in doing that. So this is the first opportunity Monday with Representative Nate's bill to participate in that. You have to sign up, and they're only allowing so many people to sign up. But I think there's going to be 3 other bills this session, supposedly, to do that, all through the Education Committee. So my hope and what they told me is that we will expand it, that this will work out well, it can expand to other committees, and that we'll take it out of U of I and do it through our libraries, because we finance the libraries and they all have broadband and they can do that video conferencing right there, and then plus it's in each local community. We're not having to travel an hour and a half to go do it, and that goes for the state of Idaho. So I think it'll work out. There may be a few bugs, but we'll see it expand over the years. It's a good thing. I don't think very many people would want to fight against it. It's just, how do you facilitate it in a logical, orderly manner, especially when it's a hot topic?
So basically logistics is really the only issue then?
Yes.
Well, and I'll add to that. So I asked the very first week of session when we had our first committee meeting, I asked all 3 of my chairmen, you know, my constituents live all the way in North Idaho. Do you have a problem if they call in? And they all said yes, they would not have a problem, and they would try to accommodate that. So if there is some bill that you want to do testimony on, if you let us know ahead of time, we can work that out. I've had people call in to committees before. They just set up a phone. You know, you can't. They don't have the technology to live stream it. They're not there, but they could at least let you call in and listen, and then ask. They'll just mute you until it's time for you, and then they'll let you do your testimony. And I think if you do get that opportunity, you know, the best thing is a lot of these legislators, they know how they're voting. They just sit there and, okay, we're listening. So, but if you just keep it short and just hit the important points and just don't, you know, go on. You know, if you hit 3 minutes is plenty. If you can't say it in 3 minutes, you probably need to regroup and, you know, think of how. But basically, that I think that you could do that now on a one-on-one kind of thing, but to get big groups or to get a group like this, it's going to take several years, I bet.
I don't know if they'll see this many people either. Maybe it is just 1 or 2 people, and then it can be fast-tracked a little bit. But they've done a good job setting it up and thinking about it logically. I was very encouraged with what they're doing. I just wanted it to start up here, not an hour and a half away. Yes, sir.
What is the current status on the standard ground bill?
Okay. So
I can tell you that she knows it better.
well, it's all through my committee. So I'm actually on a really interesting committee is state affairs. So a lot of the gun, the abortion, the liquor, all the deadly sins. As you remember with constitutional carry, 4 years ago when we first started, I was a brand new legislator. Someone said, "Can you carry this?" I'm like, "Yeah, this should be easy, right?" And leadership and just the system in general doesn't like new legislators having like this really cool piece of legislation. So the gal that's carrying, so push it the first year, it didn't work, and then the next year, more strategy and planning. It was never the exact bill I had, but they created a new bill, and that new bill got passed. So that's fine, who cares, who gets the credit, we got the bill passed. So that's kind of what's going on with the castle doctrine. Right now in Idaho, if someone breaks into your house in the middle of the night and you shoot them, you have to prove, you as the homeowner have to prove that they were coming in to cause you harm. And so this bill would change that quite a bit. And so the bill was run last year with a lot of the same tactics, with no intentions of getting anywhere. Well, this year, the same gal, Representative Zito, which you remember because she came to the gun rally up in Boundary County, and so she has the bill, and she's got a pile of that many, 7,000 petitions that say pass House Bill 444. Well, what that did was it started to, like, oh, this is getting closer. People are fired up. So they created a new bill in the Senate. It's coming from the Senate. It's not her bill. So she worked with Gun Owners of America and Second Amendment Alliance. And I don't know if I don't want to say this on the TV, cut.